أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة. صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Over these nights, we've been talking about the concept of rights within the religion of Islam. And we've started looking at some of the rights of individuals, rights that we owe to others. We looked at the rights of the poor, the rights of our parents, the rights of our spouses, and inshallah tonight we will look at the rights of children. Now before we begin tonight's talk, it's important to understand that when we talk about rights in Islam, we are primarily looking through the lens of responsibility. So when we look at the rights of children, there's more pertinent a focus on the rights that we can deliver to our own children than what we demand from our parents. Now, there are two ways to approach tonight's talk, and especially coupled with yesterday's talk. We can have a pessimistic lens, that we look and we say, oh, these are the rights of children. My parents never did that. I had a right to this, or my father or my mother never did that for me. And then sometimes people will take words out of the talk and they'll use it as a weapon against their parents and say, you never did this for me. And if they do that, of course, first thing you do is you turn on yesterday's lecture, because we started with the rights of parents. But number two, we also recognize that as children, we're not in a position to be able to judge our parents. We aren't in a position to be able to say that my parents failed because of X, Y, or Z. Why? Because we are irredeemably biased, we are involved in the situation, we don't have all of the data, because all interactions on this is subjective, and because we still have a responsibility to respect the rights of our parents, even if there are parts where they have fallen short on respecting ours. And when we talk about the rights of children, they are linked to rights of parents. They are two sides of the same coin. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, in a hadith in At-Tirmidhi and Sunan Abu Dawood, and also in Bihar al-Anwar, the Holy Prophet, he said, he is not from my ummah, the one who does not show kindness to the younger ones or to the elder ones as well. Meaning that when we respect the elders, we also have to respect the youth. When we respect the youth, we also have to respect the elders. In another tradition, in Majma'u Zawaid, the Holy Prophet says that just like your father has a right over you, your progeny, your children too, have a right over you. And bringing children into this world, it is a profound responsibility. There are a lot of things that come attached to that, and not everybody is fully prepared for that. And that's given rise to movements such as the Anti-Natalist movement, headed probably most prominently by David Bennettah. And they argue that nobody should ever have children. This is their philosophical argument. Regardless of what the consequences are, no one should ever have children. And they argue on two fronts. The axiomatic front, that is to say that if someone doesn't enjoy because they weren't brought into this world, that is neutral. But if they suffer, if they are not suffering because they weren't brought into this world, that is positive. That's his axiomatic philosophical argument. But he also offers a pragmatic one. And he says that on balance, people tend to suffer more in this world than they tend to have pleasure. And therefore, it is immoral to bring anyone into this world. Now, needless to say, this is a very anti-human philosophy, it's a very anti-Islamic philosophy, and it's one that doesn't really fit with the norms of reality. It's one of those philosophies that sort of stays at the desks of philosophers. But if we cannot accept the strong conclusion of some rather potent arguments that they put forward, we can at least accept the weak conclusion. And that is to say that every child deserves parents, but not every parent deserves children. And this is something which is corroborated by ahadith. This is not just coming from me. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih, he says in Al-Wafi, that tradition that we looked at yesterday, that Allah may curse the parents who cause their sons to dislike them, to treat them impiously. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He may have mercy on the parents who cause their children to treat them piously. Now, after hearing the rights of parents, we have found that they are very, very far-reaching and very strong. But there's a reason for that. As parents, we can't get complacent, that we sit back and we think, oh wow, I've got all of these powers. And the relationship between parent and child, it is vertical. It is necessarily vertical. That the parent must have more rights over the children. Why? In order that they may fulfill their responsibilities. Because there are so many responsibilities, as we'll talk about, we'll scratch the surface tonight, inshallah. But in order to fulfill them, they need to have those rights respected. So when we turn to our parents and we say, and we accuse them, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, may Allah protect us, from saying that they didn't fulfill our rights, part of the reason might be is because we didn't respect theirs in order to allow them to do so. So what does Imam as-Sajjad, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, say about the rights of children in Risalatul Huquq? He says, the right of your child is that you should know that he is from you and he is ascribed to you, both in his good and in his evil, both through his in the immediate affairs of this world. You are responsible for what has been entrusted to you, such as educating him in good conduct, that's husnul adab, pointing him in the direction of his Lord, and helping him to obey Allah. So act towards him with knowledge that you are acting as if you are someone who will be rewarded for good and punished for your shortcomings. There's a lot in that, and we'll dissect that inshallah tonight. He is from you and he will be ascribed to you. What does this mean? The fourth Imam, he says in another tradition, that your children have a right, that you consider if they are good or bad, that you as their parent will be recognized potentially as the cause of that. For you are the cause of their birth. It is your responsibility to teach them good manners and to guide them towards recognition of Allah Almighty. Your behavior towards your children must be such that you believe for the goodness you do, you will be rewarded, and for the bad you do, you will be punished. This is in Makarimul Akhlaq. So what does that mean? It means when we have children, we are responsible on multiple different levels. We are responsible before God that we raise good practicing Muslims. We are responsible for our own actions because there is a degree of responsibility for bringing someone into this world. We are responsible before our children because we try to raise them well, and we are responsible towards society because today's children are tomorrow's leaders. And with children, if the line is getting a little bit harsh, with children, there comes profound opportunity. And there's an opportunity like no other relationship that you could possibly have in this world. No one else in the world is 100% totally and utterly ruled by their love for you. When a child is young and they look towards their parents, they see the face of God. Because a parent to a young child is their God before they have the understanding of something more than that. And in that, they are totally invested. And so you have the opportunity to build the deepest and most fruitful relationship with your children than you have with anybody else that you will ever interact with on the planet. We read in As-Sahifa Sajjadiyya, Allahumma shdud bihim adudi وأقم بهم أودي وكثر بهم عددي وزين بهم محضري وأحيي بهم ذكري واكفني بهم في غيبتي وأعني بهم على حاجتي. O Lord, when we are praying for our children, make them strengthen my arm, straighten my burdened back, multiply my number, adorn my presence, keep alive my mention, suffice me when I am away, and help me in my needs. Children, they are for our support. They don't have to devour our lives, for when we raise them right, they give more than they take. And that is both in a worldly sense and also in the sense of the akhirah. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says in Majmu' al-Zawaid, to whomsoever a daughter is born, he should strive to impart good norms and behavior to her, and make efforts to educate her and provide means of comfort to her, such that she becomes the cause of his deliverance from hellfire. So there is profound incentive, both in a worldly sense for that depth of relation and that support, particularly later on in life, and also in the sense of our religion, that they can be, when we raise good children, they can be the cause of our being saved from hellfire. But there is also some difficulty that comes with that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Anfal, verse number 28, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. Beware that your children and your possessions are only a test, and that there is a tremendous reward with God. And one of the ways in which our children are tests is how we can raise them. Can we fulfill their rights? Can we give them a good upbringing? It is very, very difficult. And as Imam, he says in the rights of the children, that the society, they will see the goodness of the parents in children, and they will also attribute the badness that they see in parents, in children, to their parents as well. Now, is this fully fair? Is that correct? That if you have a bad child, it means they have bad parents? Can we say that? Can we make that conclusion? Absolutely not. We can't make that conclusion. It may well be true. Don't get me wrong. There is truth behind this statement potentially. But how can we know 100%? There are so many different factors involved. And to dispel this ideology entirely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He captures one of the most heart-wrenching conversations in the Holy Quran. In Surah Hud, verses 42 to 43. Nabi Nuh alayhi salam is on the ark. And he asks his son, please come on the ark, that you may be saved. His son said in response, قال سآوي إلى جبل يعصمني من الماء قال لا عاصم اليوم من أمر الله إلا من رحم وحال بينهما الموج فكان من المغرقين. He asked his son to come on board, and his son said, I will seek refuge from the mountain to save me. Nabi Nuh says, there will be no saving except in the rahmah of Allah. And then the waves separated them, and his son was amongst those who drowned. You can imagine what a heart-wrenching conversation this is for a father. He's a prophet of God. He obviously did everything right. He respected the rights of his children, and yet his child neglected Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is another way in which our children can be a test. So what specifically are some of the responsibilities of parents? Some of the rights specifically of the children. We'll look at a few of the rights concerning children before they are born, and then we will look at more rights after they are born. Before birth, there is a certain responsibility that we educate ourselves and that we know what we are doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says children are a test. And for those who've had children, they know that is very, very true. Every child is a test, and every child is their own unique test, because they come with their own circumstances and challenges. Just when you think you've figured it out, the next one comes along and turns your whole theories upside down. But when it comes to this test, when we have an examination, we're supposed to prepare. We have to try and do the most that we can. And so parental education, as far as we can, as far as our means are, is essential. And this is in two ways. This is both to understand the developmental psychology of children, and also to know some of the common pitfalls that are done to children. So in terms of theories, let's look at a couple before moving on. Perhaps the most evidence theory when we look at childhood development is something known as attachment theory. During the first couple years of life, the child who has entered this world looks particularly towards one caregiver initially. Usually it's the mother. And then, after some time in attachment theory, they look towards the father as well. But what happens? During this time period, their parent is their fortress. They can go out and explore the world. They can try new experiences. They can look around, see new things, and they do so with itmi'nan in their heart, with peace. Why? Because they know they can always return to the fortress of mum and dad. And that allows a stable relationship to develop. And that allows them to trust people. It allows them to make friends, because if anyone stabs them in the back, they know who to go back to. But in this critical part of development, if that attention is not given, if that validation is not given, then there can be pathologies that develop with this attachment. They become insecure attached. And then, for example, they become scared to let go. They don't want to explore the world. They become cynical. And then they find it more difficult to make friends at the first stages of life, and it has a knock-on effect when they go in the later years, so on and so forth, up till social responsibilities, up even till work. There are remarkable, predictable criteria that you can get from attachment theory. So, okay, this is a theory, right? This is a theoretical basis to parenting. How does it affect us practically? Well, practically, there's so many ways that it can manifest. So first of all, we give particular attention to children during the first couple years. Whatever the difficulty is, we try and we help them. And then we discipline them. We create this axis of good and bad, which is consistent. So if, for example, the child does something good, we continue to reward them. And if they do something bad, we try and make it clear that it's bad. Obviously, at that age, there's very, very little that falls into that category. But what we can't do is bring our frustrations home. Let's say we went to work, we had a hard day. We come back to our child, and our child says something, they're 1-year-old, let's say, and they come towards us with love. They've not done anything wrong, but we punish them by releasing our frustration on them. What happens? That axis is broken. They are now confused. They thought they did something good, they got punished for it, and that develops into attachment issues into the child. That feedback loop is lost. That is attachment theory. Another approach to psychological childhood development is the Piagetian model, which is to look at various stages in which children develop. So just to state one practical example, there's something called formal operational stage, which is from about 11 to 12 years onwards. Before that point, it is impossible for a child to understand philosophy. You can't engage in detailed abstract thought and discussions with them. They can absorb information, they can repeat back information, they can abstract a little bit, but not to the point of genuine philosophical reasoning. So if we don't understand this and we're trying to engage on a higher level with the child, and we look down on them because they can't fulfill it, it's because they've not reached that stage yet. It's not their fault. Erik Erikson, with his model of identity crises, from where we get the term midlife crisis, he talks about the teenage years, between 12 and 18. One of the reasons why teenagers, they tend to struggle is because they're going through a crisis between identity and role confusion. On the one hand, they want their own unique identity, and on the other hand, they want to melt into a group. And so when we understand that this tug of war is going on within our children at particular ages, we are better able to help them and approach them in those times, rather than just saying, oh, it's difficult, it's a difficult age. And then there are other small tips and tricks that can help as we go along, even aside from psychological models, things like when we feed children. That you put food in front of children, and one of the classic things that is done is if they don't finish the food, they're forced to. And that is something which actually causes an unhealthy relationship with food. Unless they're malnourished, we shouldn't push that, because that can cause issues with food later on in life. And again, we might suddenly say, oh, well, my mother or my father, they would force me to eat food. Can I hold that against them? Again, that's not the purpose of tonight's lecture. Not to weaponize what I'm saying, because perhaps they didn't know. And when they do things like this, they're not doing it because they have a vendetta against you. They're not out to get you. Your parents love you more than anyone else in the world ever would. They want the best for you. And their love is unconditional, particularly that of the mother. So when they make mistakes like this, it comes from a place of love, not from a place of harm. That's right number one, before birth. The second right before birth is to choose a good spouse. Now, we went into a little bit more detail a couple nights ago when we were talking about the rights of spouses. But it suffices to say that Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi when he wanted a child like Hazrat Abbas, he searched for a lady like Baneen, who's from a tribe which was known for its bravery, and she was a woman of very, very good and upright character. So that's another right of children before their birth. A third right of children before their birth is their right to life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the 81st surah of the Holy Quran, that on the day of judgment, the unborn child, بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ. On the day of judgment, parents will be asked, for what crime did you kill your innocent child? Once the child has been conceived, Islamically, it must be completed. They must be brought into this world except in the most extreme of circumstances. There are clear moral lines. Islam was very vocal in protecting the rights of the unborn. Their fourth right before birth is to give them a stable environment during their pregnancy. Now, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa he says in Bahar al-Anwar, lucky is the one whose foundation of virtue was made in the womb, and unlucky is the one whose foundation of wickedness had its rudiments in the mother's womb. What does that mean? When the mother is carrying the child, they're giving physical nourishment, so they're trying to eat healthy, they're taking the appropriate supplements, they're avoiding anything teratogenic. Physical nourishment, emotional nourishment. Try and keep things as calm, as stress-free as possible, because those stress hormones, they cause impacts on the child. And spiritually, avoiding haram music, reading Quran, doing wudu, du'as, so on and so forth. And predominantly, in order to fulfill this right of the children, predominantly it falls upon the men. Because it is for men to step up and while their wives are pregnant, to take that extra responsibility, to introduce that extra level of sukoon, so that it can help not only the mother, but also the child within. And the fifth right of the child before birth is a good name. Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says in Tuhaf al-Uqul that there are three rights that a child has on his father. The first is to select a good mother. The second is to give him a good name. And the third is to spend all his effort in raising him. And when we give children a good name, when we name them after a holy personality, we're drawing a connection between them and that person. And not only with that person, but critically the value that they embody. For example, if we call them Zainul Abidin, we are creating that connection with Imam al-Sajjad, the one who prayed, the one who was patient, the one who was soft in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we name them Ali, we are associating them with the qualities of Haydar al-Karrar. And what's interesting is that children, they grow up. And one of the first interesting things that they do is they try and find out what their name means. So they'll be in a classroom, and perhaps there's an Arabic teacher who's come, and they'll ask, what does my name mean? And if we've given them a good name, it's something they can be proud of, something they can aspire to. But if we gave them a fashionable name that has no meaning, if we gave them a name simply because it sounded good, but it has no substance, it's a point of embarrassment. And it's something that they have for the rest of their lives. But along with the good name, there comes good akhlaq as well. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says in Majmu' al-Zawaid that the best thing that a father can give, the best gift a father can give to his child is good manners and good akhlaq. So that they don't become an embarrassment to the name that we bless them with. So those are some of the rights of children before birth. What about the rights after birth? We'll look at a few rights concerning that. The first right of children after birth is love and affection. Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi he would search for opportunities to express his love for Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhim salam. Whenever they were walking, he would pick them up, he would kiss them. He wouldn't let anybody treat them with any sort of aggression. If they made them cry, he would get upset. He's giving a khutbah and either Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they fall down. He gets down from the mimbar, he goes and he picks them up. When he's in sujood, he prolongs his sujood. All of these are examples of the way in which the Holy Prophet was showing his affection for his grandchildren. And he condemned those that did not kiss and did not show affection for their children. So love and affection. And that translates into the form of gifts and also of time. When it comes to gifts, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi he says in Mustadrak al-Wasail that the one who goes to the market in order to buy gifts for his family and he gives them to his family, he gets the same reward as someone who is giving charity. And not only that, when he comes home and he gives the gifts, he should give the gifts first to his daughters, first to the female members of the family to show them that extra protection, that extra affection. But aside from physical acts of affection, aside from gifts, it is also paramount to give them time. And this is where things get difficult. So far, as parents, we might think, oh, show them love and affection, that's easy. Give them gifts, that's fine, Amazon Prime delivery. But when it comes to giving time, that's where things break down. Nothing can replace that. Children are like sponges. They absorb the qualities of whoever they're exposed to. If we want our children to be like us, we expose them to us. And the less we do that, the less they will emulate us. Especially in the modern world, it gets difficult. You know, there's a story about a child who once approached his father. His father was a very busy man. He approached his father one day and he said, "Oh father, how much do you earn in an hour?" And the father, he got a little bit upset. You know what they say? Never ask a woman how old she is. Never ask a man how much he earns. So he gets defensive and he says, "Why are you asking me this?" But after a few moments, he calms down and he says, "Okay, I'll tell you. I earn, let's say, I don't know, £40 an hour." So he got excited. He said, £40 an hour? The father said, "Yes." He said, "In that case, can I have £25? And now the father lost it. He's like, "So that's why you were asking me? Just because you wanted to take my money so you could spend it on toys? Go away from here. I have no time for this right now. Probably had a stressful day at work." Child goes away. A few moments later, the father, he feels compunction. I shouldn't have done that. So he goes up and he knocks on the door and he finds his child is in the room. He goes up to him and he says, "Son, I'm sorry. It's a little bit, busy day. Just tell me, why is it that you were asking me for £25? He goes to the corner of his room, he gets his piggy bank, he smashes it, and he takes out of it £15. And then he says to his father, "And I put my £15 together. Can I please buy 1 hour of your time?" And that's the way things fall nowadays. That's the way things go because we're so busy with work, particularly with fathers. There's that affinity to work, whereas sometimes our children, they need us more. And this affection and love, it's not optional. It's not something which is good for a child, it's something which is essential for a child. If they don't get enough in their formative years, they can also physically die, not only suffer profound psychological damage. There's a famous experiment that was conducted by Henry Harlow, where he looked at rhesus monkeys. And he put them in a box, and in different corners of the box, there were two different, what were called for the purpose of the experiment, two different mothers. On one side of the box, there were just a wired cage, and that wired cage had food in it. So they would, if the baby wanted food, they would get it from the wired mother. And on the other side of the box, there was basically a model of a monkey. It had a little bit of cloth on it, had some buttons for eyes. And so the experimenters, Henry Harlow, he thought, well, obviously, the more important thing for the young monkey is that it needs sustenance. So over time, it'll realize that the wired mother is the one that gives it food, and so it'll have more of an affinity for that mother. But when they ran the experiments, they found the opposite. It would go and take the food from the wired mother because it needed that to survive, but then it would go over to the cloth mother, and it would hug the cloth mother because it needed that affection, it needed that companionship. But with this love, it's important not to go overboard, because that's another difficulty, that sometimes we love our children so much that we give them everything. We give them too much. Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says in Tariq Ya'qub, the worst of fathers is one whose kindness to his children drives him to excess. When we give too much to our children, all the time, without any feedback, we can drown them in honey. And again, that itself causes problems. Parenting isn't easy. It's about finding these balances. And that's why when our parents, when they're trying to raise us well, one of the reasons they have those rights is so that they have that control. If, for example, they are trying to limit the time we're spending on screens, if they're trying to make sure we're not spending too much time on social media, we get upset, we get angry. When we have a tablet in our hands, it's like it's super glued. It's one of the most difficult things to get off a child. And yet, that is one of the rights of our parents, is that they have to discipline us, that they have that responsibility for us. And as far as we can, we should try and support them in that. The second right of the child after birth is education and training. Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says to his son Imam Hassan in Wasa'ul al-Shia that, "O my son, a child's mind is like the untilled soil. Whatever is put into it is accepted. Therefore, before your heart turned hard, I engrossed it with steps to make you polite." When a child is young, they are, again, like I said before, they're like sponges. Imam Ali, he says in Ghurad al-Hikam, it's like soft soil. Again, whatever you put it is accepted. And that is that golden opportunity. Because on the one hand, they have that 100% investment in us, but also they are receptive to what we give to them. That is an opportunity, particularly in their formative years. And we try and educate our children as much as we can. We try and get them into the top schools. We try and push them to get to the top of the class. We try and get them to study, no matter how difficult it might be. And the key to the door of knowledge is a question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made children naturally curious. In the Holy Quran, Surah An-Nahl, verse number 78, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. Allah has delivered you from the wombs of your mother in a condition that you knew nothing. And He gave you eyes and ears and a heart that you may identify God's bounties and become grateful. Children have a natural inclination to learn. They're naturally curious. And they ask questions. And boy, do children like to ask questions. And we can get frustrated sometimes. It can get on our nerves, especially that three-lettered question. The dreaded question, why? You answer that question, then it comes again and again, ad infinitum. And it can become very, very difficult. And we become frustrated as parents. But one of the rights our children have over us is that we answer as many of their questions as we can. And let's say they ask one of those questions that we don't know. Then we try and find out. And what if they ask a question that human beings don't know? If they want to know how gravity works, for example. Then we can say, well, we can validate it. We say, yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a really good one. Let's try and learn together and find out. As opposed to saying, stop asking these silly questions, concentrate on your work. See the difference? One fosters that curiosity. And Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says in Quran al-Hikam that one who asks questions in his childhood will be able to answer questions in his adulthood. If we shut down that key, if we close the door to wisdom when they are most receptive to it, then we are doing them a disservice. And what an opportunity it is. When they ask a question, just think about this. When a child, especially in their formative years, they come to you in their tender moments, they're confused, they don't know. There is some distress in their hearts. They open up their chest to you and they say, "Oh mother, oh father, please plant something inside me that I may be satisfied." What a golden opportunity. And later on down the line, especially when they become slightly older, we miss those times. So let's try and seize those opportunities when we can. But not only educating them in the basic sense, in giving them information, but also giving them wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He records in Surah Luqman some of the advice that Hazrat Luqman gave to his child. Because in the age of information, it's important to give people a way to navigate through it as well. Otherwise we can drown. So he says, just to take one example, there's so many examples in the surah which is worth reading. Surah 31 of the Holy Quran. Ya bunay. First of all, compassion, love. Oh my dear child. يا بني إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأتي بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير. When he's teaching his son about the power of God, about the knowledge of God, he says the following. This is some theoretical knowledge. My son, even if the weight of a mustard seed was hidden inside a rock, or anywhere in the heavens or the earth, God will bring it to light, for He is all subtle and aware. That God has so much knowledge and so much power that a mustard seed, barely visible to the human eye, same color as a rock, if He puts it inside it, God will find it like that. It will come back to Him. How do you find that? If I gave you a rock now, you needed to find it, you have to break it into pieces at least as small as the mustard seed. And anywhere in the universe, this solar system or a distant galaxy, Allah will find it with no difficulty. He's meeting his child on his level, giving him this analogy so you can understand the complex theory. But he also gives him practical advice as well. In verse 17, يَا بُنَيَّ أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. Keep up the salah, command what is good, forbid what is wrong, and be patient for whatever happens to you. And what beautiful advice Allah has given here that He's captured in the words of Hazrat Luqman. First, pray to God. Establish your connection to God to goodness. So work on yourself first. Once you have that connection, then you encourage good, forbid evil. But once you do that, recognize there will be a reaction. So what do? Have sabr. That connection, that thread that he is drawing for his son in a practical way, that is one of the ways in which we teach our children. And as children, we should be receptive to the wisdom of our parents. They've lived a life. They have experiences that we will never understand. If we take from their wisdom, we can learn so much rather than repeating some of the mistakes that they might have made. But not only in a wisdom sense, also in a religious sense as well. That we are supposed to try and give our religious values to our children. In Surah Tahrim, verse 6, the verse I recited at the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O mu'mineen, guard yourselves and your families away from the fire that is fueled by people and by stones. We have a responsibility to help them on the religion. In Surah Ar-Rum, verse 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very clearly establishes the superiority of Islam. Islam is the greatest gift that we can give to our children. It is the highest value that we have. It is that connection to God. It gives us so much meaning and purpose in life. And step by step, right from the time of pregnancy, when we read Quran, we read du'as, from childhood, we teach them the stories of old. We tell them of the accolades of Ahlul Bayt so that they love the members of the holy household. We keep them interested. We tell them about the superheroes we have in the religion that are far better than superheroes anywhere else. And especially this love of Ali Muhammad. And with teenagers, we have rational arguments. We give them reasons to believe in what they believe in. From a young age, we try and expose them to aspects of Islam. As soon as they're born, adhan in the right ear, iqama in the left ear. We take them to the masjids. We bring them to the janamazes when we're praying. We take them when we are opening our fasts for iftar, when we wake up for suhoor. We take them to madrasas. We put Islamic television programming on, so on and so forth. Why? Because slowly it gives the religion of Islam as a gift to them. And we teach them that God loves them. Before we teach them fear of God, we teach them love of God. There's a wonderful hadith from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. It's recorded in Bukhari and Muslim. When Allah completed creation, He wrote in a book that He put upon the throne, where it was written, "Verily, my mercy precedes my wrath." God's mercy, God's love before His fear. That is the second right of children after birth, that we educate and we train them in the ways of this world and the next. And the third right of children is that we be good role models for them as much as we can. And this is arguably the greatest right that a child has over their parents, because children will copy what they see much more so than what they hear. Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says in Ghurar al-Hikam, beware that your behavior might render your family and your relatives to be of the ill-fated people. That the way we live our lives, it has an impact on those around us. They see the way we behave. If you want honest children, we should be honest. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says in Wasa'ul al-Shia, there is no merit in falsehood, whether in seriousness or jest. Never promise your child something if you do not intend to fulfill it. For surely falsehood leads to sin, and sin leads to the fire. If we want honest children, we be honest with our children. If we want polite children, we be polite with them. Even when we're angry, we don't use bad words. In Surah Al-Humaza, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ, woe unto every scandal monger and backbiter. One of the aspects of that is to find faults in people, to look for things that you can insult them with, which is what sometimes we do when we're angry, right? Because sometimes when people are angry, they want their words to hurt. So they'll find something bad to say about their children, and that's where insecurities start. So if we want polite children, we be polite to them and polite to people around us. If we want respectful children, we also respect our children. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says in Makarimul Akhlaq, respect your children and give them a good upbringing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you. And as I mentioned before, the respect between parents and children, it's not symmetrical. There's not a horizontal relationship where every aspect of life you negotiate. Fine, I'll eat my vegetables, but only if you let me go on the Xbox for an hour. That's not how parenting works, right? It is a vertical relationship. But there can be a vertical relationship where there is common respect and cordiality. It's what happens every time we go to work. Our boss has authority over us, but we respect our boss, and hopefully, maybe Allah has given us a good boss, they will respect us as well. If we want them to be responsible, we give them responsibility. If we want them to have the ability to carry weight and substance, we give their opinions weight and substance. We involve them in the discussions when they want to be involved. We try and encourage them to contribute. Because if we don't, if we always push them to the side, oh, they're just bache, they're just children, just ignore what he says, what will happen? They'll grow up thinking that their opinion isn't important. Or, what's even worse, they will go to other people who actually listen to them, away from us. And that could be friends who are not necessarily a good influence. And again, that's an opportunity squandered as a parent. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, when he would come back from travels, children would rush to him because he loved children, children loved him. But rather than get irritated at them because they were in his way, he would get down from his horse. He would pick them up. He would hug them. He would kiss them. He would take as many as he safely could on his horse. And then he would tell his companions, please take the rest. He gave them that importance. He didn't just ignore them and enter into the city. We be good role models for them, and we also protect them from bad role models as well. You know, there's a story about a happy family, husband and wife and their children. And one day the husband, he brings a guest into the house. And the wife, she doesn't like it. She's a bit averse to him coming. But the father insists, look, everybody is bringing guests like this into their houses. He's going to bring a lot of good. He's very wise. He's very knowledgeable. He knows current affairs. He knows a lot about history. He knows a lot about the religion. So the wife, she grudgingly, she accepts. And as time goes along, initially, it seemed to be the case. He was keeping them up to date on religious affairs, on worldly affairs. And the husband, wife, and the children, they got attached to this guest. But as time went on, the guest, he started to swear. He started to use bad language. He started to smoke. He started to be rude. He started to dress inappropriately. He even started to drink alcohol. And at that point, the wife went to the husband and said, look, we need to get rid of this guest now. He's destroying our household. And the husband said, I recognize that, but now we're too attached. There's nothing we can do. And who was that guest that they brought in? That guest was television. It was the TV. All of this that we bring inside our house, not just the television now, I suppose you've got screens, you've got iPads, you've got computers, so on and so forth. And when we give them these devices, it is paramount that we know what they're going on. We put the appropriate parental controls on. We don't just give it, oh, we'll trust them. Of course, there has to be trust with our children, but there's certain areas where we have to draw boundaries and restrictions. Because what are they up against? They are up against a multi-billion-dollar industry with reams of psychological research. What's the best music? What's the best color? What's the best faces? What's the best content that we can possibly show in order to bring them into our fold? Your children don't stand a chance against that. As parents, it's important that we make sure we know what they're going on. Even though as children, you might be wondering, this is supposed to be about the rights of children. Why is he saying to take the screens away from me? But this is one of the responsibilities of the parent. Another of the rights of children after birth is to not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. This is Jordan Peterson in his 12 Rules for Life. This is his rule number 5. And it's corroborated in Islamic scripture as well. Sahifa Sajadiyya. Allahumma wa munna alayya bi baqa'i wuldi wa bi islahihim li wa bi imta'i bihim. O God, be kind to me through my children. Set them right for me and allow me to enjoy them. Now you might be wondering, aren't we supposed to let our children be whoever they want to be? Aren't they allowed to express themselves in any way they want? To a certain degree, of course, you allow this exploration, but there's a point. And the point and the reason why we prevent them from doing things that make us dislike them is because, number one, it can foster an unhealthy relationship. If they keep doing it, that relationship breaks down. But number two, more importantly, which links to the point that we said yesterday, you are the average person. If you as the average adult don't like it, both mother and father don't like it, it means the average adult in society won't like it. And if the average adult in society doesn't like it and you let them keep doing it, whenever they interact with adults around them, what happens? Rather than treating them with kindness and with love and with respect, they put on a fake smile. They lie through their teeth pretending that they like the child, and the child grows up with all of this cynicism, thinking that everybody around them is lying to them all the time. So that is a very important aspect of enjoying one's children as well. But how do we shape children? How do we enforce this? Well, there are feedback axes. The most important answer to this question of all is feedback. We all know that people respond to feedback. And we're running a bit short on time, but just to state for those who are interested, look up B.F. Skinner and behaviorism in the 20th century. Very, very powerful. But we tend to be more vocal when we're complaining, as opposed to when we're giving compliments. So if the child does something wrong, we're quick to tell them you've done something wrong. But the more important and effective aspect of feedback is to encourage them when they do something right. And that we tend to forget. We take it for granted. If they do something right, we're supposed to encourage them to do it well done. And we tell them the reason why, because then they might generalize it. And the opposite is also true as well. When they do something which is wrong, we also do have to discipline them as well. But we never underestimate the importance of attention. Remember, that is the universal currency for children, particularly when they are younger. And the fifth right is that they have the right also to be disciplined. And disciplining children, again, it is important because that's what keeps them on the straight and narrow. Because your household, it is a microcosm, it is a low resolution representation of the world. And they have to be able to work within a framework of rules. Otherwise, when they go out in society, when they meet people who aren't as forgiving with them, then they won't be able to integrate into society as well. But when we discipline, we do so in the best way that we can. We, for example, one parenting technique that is used often for children who have developmental issues is called magic parenting 1, 2, 3, which is when they cross a boundary, you simply say that's 1. When they cross it a second time, that's 2. When they cross it a third time, that's 3. Then the punishment kicks in. Minimal necessary force, minimum amount of time, they have a timeout. And then as soon as they're okay, they come back, you dismiss everything. You pretend nothing ever happened. So much less energy. And also, when it comes to discipline, it is important never to hit a child. This is also something which is in the psychological research is absolutely clear. That when we hit a child, we cause more harm than good. Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, an intelligent person gets guidance through politeness. It is only animals that cannot be corrected except through beatings. And in Islamic fiqh, if we hit a child and leave a mark, even a little red mark, a little bit of erythema, then we have to pay blood money on it. There's a small amount of gold that has to be paid. And the worse the injury that's left, the more that has to be paid. And violence begets violence. When children see violence, this is reflected very famously in the Bobo doll experiment. When children were shown an adult taking out frustrations on a large doll, and then the children were invoked to frustration, because they saw the adult doing it, they copied it. And then when they became frustrated, they went up to the doll and started hitting it as well. This is one of the ways in which abuse and physical violence can be inherited. And Islam is not a violent religion. Another right of our children is justice. In Surah An-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah orders for you justice. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he was once sitting with some of his companions, and one of the companions, his son came, and the child came forward. The father, he hugged him, he kissed him, he said, sit down with me. Then a few moments later, the son left, and then the daughter came. And when the daughter came, the man, he said, sit down. No hug, no kiss, no love, no affection. And Rasulullah, he couldn't accept this. He stood up. This is in Majmu'u Zawaid. He said, why don't you keep consideration in the need for justice and equality between your children? That's one of the areas of great strife. When we show one child more love, at least externally, than the other, then we are causing problems for our relationship with other children and also between the siblings as well. Justice, one of the easiest things to say, one of the hardest things to do in practice. And the final right for tonight, because we're short on time, is about the right to give them good friends. We have to engineer an environment as much as possible to surround them with good people. If you want, for example, religious children, we give them religious friends. If you want them to remember the time of Salah, we socialize and associate with people who get up and do Salah at the time of Salah. If we want them to dress modestly, we get them friends who dress modestly. And we have that control as parents, especially when we're younger. It's our responsibility to socialize with other parents in order that they may create that sort of networking, so that they make the best friends that they possibly can. This is the final right, inshallah, we'll discuss tonight. But in conclusion, It's important not to go away from tonight and armed with 8 rights after birth, 4 rights, 5 rights before birth, and now hold these against our parents, use as a weapon. Because again, remember, Islam focuses on duties rather than on claiming your own rights, number one. Number two, we are too biased and we don't have enough information to be judge, jury, and executioner. And if we are old enough to understand this talk and understand these rights, it means that we're old enough to understand right from wrong. And even if our parents have fallen short, never give up your agency. Never give up your humanness. You still have a choice. Let's say your parent brought you up with, God forbid, an unhealthy relationship with food. Appreciate that, understand that, but then work above that. Then try and work on that yourself. You have the ability, you have the consciousness, you have the resources. We have the internet, we have so many units and so many ways and tariqas that we can do this. We can never absolve blame from ourselves and put it on our parents. That judgment is for Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Zalzala, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ.